Christopher Nolan is one of the top Hollywood directors of the 21st century, having cemented himself as both a must-see auteur filmmaker and the mind-bending action movie entrepreneur. Christopher Nolan, no doubt, will go down with one of the very best film resumes of all time. But how do Christopher Nolan films rank against one another? They're all great movies, but which are the best? Right off the bat, we're going to start by clearing some space off the list. This is my list of Christopher Nolan's best, so we won't be including what I consider to be his lowest tier. Let's call them honorable mentions. Following Insomnia, The Dark Knight Rises, Batman Begins, and Dunkirk are all beginning on the cutting room floor and will not be included on this list. While each of these films is a personal favorite of mine, when stacked up against other Christopher Nolan films, I believe these all share qualities that don't allow them to contend with the rest of the films. I'll make my argument for cutting these films quickly, and let's start with my most controversial choice. Dunkirk seems to be the one Nolan film I can't get excited about watching. All his other films excite me to no end for either its concise storytelling or immersive visual style, but while Dunkirk attempts both, after multiple viewings the film still doesn't hit, for me, as hard as the way The Dark Knight, Interstellar, and Oppenheimer do. The Dark Knight Rises and Batman Begins both begin on the cutting room floor as well, strictly because they faltered under the weight of their middle sibling, The Dark Knight, a rare comic book film which truly transcends the genre and goes on further to many people's best of all time lists. Following and Insomnia at this point speak for themselves. While both are excellent films in their own right, the two do not belong on a Nolan best of list, let alone a very best list. Round 1. I should note, this entire ranking list will be non-linear in an effort to recreate Nolan's most famous writing technique and to keep things a little interesting. In no particular order, our 7 very best Nolan films are Memento, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, Tenet, and Oppenheimer. These films are what I consider to be Christopher Nolan's 7 best films and will be competing for this video's top spot. Now, most people are going to assume that I put Oppenheimer on the top of the list, but that might not be how things turn out. Stay until the end to find out my number 1 Christopher Nolan film, and comment down below to let me know what your favorite Christopher Nolan film is and why. Okay, let's break down each film and find out which are moving to round 2 and the semifinals. The Dark Knight. With The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan took the first steps into his future by introducing general audiences to IMAX 1570mm photography by filming and presenting selected action sequences in the, at the time, pioneering format. For more on IMAX 1570 and speculation on Nolan's next film being shot and presented entirely IMAX, I have a video breaking down everything IMAX and Nolan, which I linked in the description. Beyond the celluloid, The Dark Knight broke comic book movie boundaries by crafting a tightly paced crime thriller told as a Greek tragedy and starring Batman, Harvey Dent, and the Joker. This film continues to be in the conversation more than 16 years after release. For these reasons, The Dark Knight survives round 1 and moves up to the semifinals. Oppenheimer is obviously moving up to the semis as well. With Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan takes all his powers of storytelling, camera movement, and score and edits together a masterful montage of a movie, which tells a tale which told by any other would have been a bland, boring bomb. Pun intended. No, Oppenheimer, Oscar winner, future classic, moves to the semis. Tenet, a film which not only divided audiences, but the Nolan fan base. Some believe Tenet to truly be Christopher Nolan's magnum opus, free from all restraint. Tenet is Nolan at his most unrestrained. And while some, like myself, are in awe of Tenet and all it accomplishes both narratively and by pushing the boundaries of technical motion picture photography, most viewers simply do not want to do the homework Tenet requires. This is unfortunate, as John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, Kenneth Branagh, and Michael Caine in his final role all bring home rock star performances and helped land Tenet in Nolan's very best. But alas, Tenet does not make it to the semifinals, as when stacked up against some of Nolan's very best, it just doesn't make the cut. Inception is a film that cemented Christopher Nolan as a made man. After a string of successful films, Memento, Insomnia, Batman Begins, The Prestige, and The Dark Knight, it seemed as if the Batman sequel couldn't be topped. I remember seeing the first poster for Inception from the director of The Dark Knight. It was so exciting to see we would be getting an original Christopher Nolan film so soon after Nolan's now classic sequel to Batman Begins, but I could never have known how Inception would change the landscape of cinema forever. For one thing, on the surface level, the trailer for Inception with the now infamous BWOM literally altered all movie trailers for years. It seems like every new action movie had a BWOM in it, which, to be fair, is a bit funny considering Hans Zimmer and Chris Nolan created the BWOM as a literal diegetic sound. Diegetic sound means the audio one hears in a film comes from a source from within the film. For example, a ticking sound coming from a clock or a song playing in the background coming from a character's radio, as opposed to being part of the score. So the BWOM was actually a single note slowed down from Edith Piaf's famous tune. In the original song, which we hear in the film used to alert the dreamers of an incoming kick, the rhythm goes bom ba bom and so on. As the dreamers go down a level of the dream, time slows, and so does the song they hear in the background. Now, instead of bomb ba bomb, it's significantly slowed down and we hear, which is just the first note slowed down, and that's just one note of the score. The film, over a decade later, continues to wow audiences, new and returning alike. Starring an all-star cast led by Leonardo DiCaprio, Inception goes down as a Nolan all-timer and must make it to the semi-finals. With Interstellar, Christopher Nolan joined the pantheon of directors who have attempted to follow in the footsteps of Stanley Kubrick and his seminal film 2001: A Space Odyssey. Since Kubrick, George Lucas, Ridley Scott, James Cameron, and other greats have all thrown their name in the hat to fill his empty shoes. But only Nolan seems to be cobbling his very own new pair of loafers. Interstellar allowed Nolan to give audiences something they hadn't seen possibly since Kubrick's 2001, science and physics on full display. And like Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke before them, Nolan worked on perfecting the presentation of this science with physicist Kip Thorne, who Michael Caine models his Professor Brand after. And again, just as Kubrick had painstakingly taken the time to show audiences what it might feel like to be in space, Christopher Nolan's eye appears to focus much of the action on the feel of space travel. For example, during the climax of the film, Matthew McConaughey's Cooper attempts to dock with a spinning out-of-control spaceship, the Endurance, after Matt Damon's Dr. Mann accidentally blows himself out of the airlock, causing an almost detrimental to the mission explosion. In any other film, this scene would have been focused more on Cooper and Mann's conflict, resulting in either a chase or a fight. Here, space. Lingering in the background is the silent villain. Just as HAL 9000 unplugs Dr. Frank Poole's oxygen and leaves him floating alone in space to die, Nolan understands that while Damon's Dr. Mann gives Interstellar the drama it so needed to move the story forward, nature and the elements continue to be the true focus of the film as it grounds the narrative and allows the viewer to feel transported, just as Kubrick was able to do all the way back in 1968. Interstellar moves up to the next round of other prestigious Nolan films. And speaking of prestigious, let's talk about Memento. Okay. The Prestige. The Prestige is a film that could only exist prior to The Dark Knight. Just 2 years before Christian Bale and Nolan would become Batman legends and release The Dark Knight, Bale and Nolan collaborated for a small project in between Batman Begins and Batman Magnum Opus on a project with similar superhero star Hugh Jackman. The Prestige tells a twisted tale of two young entrepreneurial magicians in late 19th century London. Minimal special effects are required to tell one of Nolan's most dramatic pieces. Somehow, Nolan is able to tell the film's story not only in the structure of a magic trick, hence the name, The Prestige, representing the climax of a magic trick, wherein, for example, the magician would bring back the recently disappeared assistant. Here, the film truly is a magic trick being played on us without our knowledge. The Bordens, hidden in plain sight, live a double life, both living as Alfred Borden and and as Fallon, the magician's engineer. Told via each of the dueling magicians' reading of the other's diary, we are given multiple layers of unreliable narration, which feeds into the viewer's paranoia, which mirrors both Jackman's Angier and Bale's Borden. An incredible film, but not the top. The Prestige, unfortunately, does not move on to the semifinals. Memento is required viewing for any fan of Nolan's. But not only that, also for any fan of 90s noirs. Memento is the modern noir, perfectly balancing the feel and mystery with then fairly modern narrative techniques, i.e., while not specifically non-linear, similar to Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. No, Memento's forward and backward double storylines stream simultaneously toward one another, meeting somewhere in the middle of the story. Memento lets the viewer experience life as our main character. This would be a motif Nolan would return to over and over again in his career. The experience of a film allowing one to experience an idea, almost as if what Christopher Nolan has been trying to do all along is incept us all. Memento, required viewing and all, doesn't stack up against its younger brothers. The Dark Knight, Oppenheimer, Interstellar, and Inception all move on to the semi-finals, while Memento remains a top 7 Nolan film, but not a top 4. Moving on. Round 2. The Dark Knight, Interstellar, Inception, Oppenheimer. How do we decide here which is best? These are 4 incredible films. Each stands on its own as the top film of its genre. The Dark Knight, contender for best superhero film of all time, even 16 years later. Oppenheimer, easily the highest grossing biopic of all time. As of May 2024, Oppenheimer had grossed $974 million globally. Oppenheimer also defies its genre and reaches further to create not just a period piece, but an exciting, dramatic look at the life of a complicated and important human being. Oppenheimer must move on to the final round because Oppenheimer doesn't only bridge genres, but audiences. Film lovers and general audiences alike flocked to the theaters to see Christopher Nolan's practical take on an atomic explosion, but stayed in their seats for 3 short hours because of his ability to tell a story. Yes, Oppenheimer moves on to the final round, along with Interstellar. But first, a final word about Inception and The Dark Knight, which come in at 3rd and 4th place. Each film stands on their own as a classic and masterpiece. These 2 films alone would have cemented any other director into the annals of film history alone. But with Christopher Nolan, these 2 are, in my opinion, not his 2 finest. Here's a quick recap before the final round and winner is announced. In 7th place, we have Memento, which is the base and structure for all future Nolan films. In 6th place, Tenet takes Memento's reverse gunshot to its absolute limit when Christopher Nolan creates a truly experiential film. In 5th, The Prestige balances high concepts with small character drama and leaves the viewer wanting to restart the film as soon as it ends. Inception is our 4, with The Dark Knight at a very difficult number 3. Oppenheimer absolutely does edge out The Dark Knight for the number 2 spot, which leaves us with Interstellar at number 1. Maybe it's the dad in me, but Interstellar's story about a father and daughter separated by time and space, but not love, and how their strong bond helps to hold together the fabric of the human race, simultaneously saving humanity and pushing us further into the future. That story just gets me every time. Interstellar is a love letter to people. The hopeful message that we are special and that together we can solve any problem if we only come together for one another. You see, Dr. Mann, Matt Damon's coward of a commander, represents humanity's attempt to evolve for the sake of evolution. Cooper, Murph, and Brand represent humanity's attempt to evolve for the sake of love and family. Success in the end only comes from great effort and care. You see, the reason for doing a thing is just as important as the thing itself. The docking sequence is an excellent example of this theory, in that while TARS tells Cooper it's impossible to dock the Endurance, Cooper knows that while improbable, it was instead necessary. And it's this worldview which leads to the eventual success
success of mankind.
Wherein Oppenheimer warns of man's power, Interstellar ponders how our power could instead free us, moving forward and deep into the future. But this is just my list. What about you? Rate your top 7 Chris Nolan in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It really does help out a ton. And if you're excited for what Christopher Nolan has in store for us next, subscribe, as I will be bringing you all the updates on his upcoming 2026 film up to and after its release. If you're enjoying my content and want just a little more, why not become a channel member? Get access to videos early and interact with me personally via member-only live chats. We can discuss or debate, whichever you prefer. But until then, why not check out this video? This was Film School Dad.